You guys know me as the most honest cartoon on the internet, so I need to confess that I don't know anything about sports. However, I do know that I love the team over at the Majority Report because they have incisive political commentary and always stay on topic. Let's hear them debunk Matt Walsh about women's sports.
Or I guess more people are becoming aware of how little WNBA players get paid. Caitlin Clark, first overall pick, this phenomenon that everybody is excited about her game, and she's, elevating the sport of women's basketball. There are legitimate critiques about why she gets such outsized coverage because of a racist media, and a lot
Barstool guys are willing to talk about it.
Yeah, why the Barstool guys are more willing to talk, be super fans of this, a white girl.
Everyone is racist, off to a good start.
Right, and I that's all legitimate, but I think that's so separate from who she is. And
she doesn't play into that at all.
She does not. She's awesome. I mean, and a great role model and an incredible shooter. And you could just see how she looks different out there in college.
She looks different. Now who's racist?
She was drafted first overall by the Indiana Fever.
The Indiana Fever? Really? What, does Indiana have pneumonia?
And this contract went viral here. This is what her contract is. I mean, it's laughable. She is because of, the way that the league is structured, she's making $76,000 in her rookie year, $78K, $85K, $97.5K.
But that's more than I make.
She'll be fine because, she has a State Farm deal.
And she has a State Farm deal? Man, I suck.
And hopefully she doesn't get injured. Like, people have to look at these players, this labor, like they do not get to do this for 40 years.
Yep.
They have a limited amount of time, and if they get injured in the peak of that, then that absolutely also massively impacts the future contract. So all these people that are betting on like, oh yeah, they'll be good on the second contract. Hopefully they don't tear an ACL.
That does sound like a rough deal for female athletes.
No, yeah, and that this is a huge problem that also extends to the NFL, where it's a contact sport as well, where you can have one injury and it'll change your entire life.
Wait, so this is a problem for male athletes too?
Given how much money Caitlin Clark is going to just by viewership, I'm excited for when
she's already earned the NCAA.
Yes, and it hasn't come back to her. Just from viewership that she's going to provide for the WNBA, this is why people were widely critical of this contract, obviously, and it just shows that the WNBA needs to change.
It does make sense to be frustrated if she's generating profits for the team.
But not Matt Walsh. Matt Walsh thinks not only is this justified, but that, honestly, women's basketball maybe shouldn't even exist.
Matt Walsh, that bearded bastard.
In fact, WNBA players are not underpaid at all. They are, if anything, vastly overpaid. By all rights, as a simple economic matter, WNBA players should not be getting paid anything. If they're getting paid anything above zero, they are overpaid. So here are some basic facts to flesh this out. First of all, the WNBA has existed for nearly 30 years. It has never once turned a profit.
Wait, I thought this player was generating a lot of profits for the team.
According to WSN.com, a sports betting site, the WNBA generates about $60 million in revenue. For the record, an article in Vox claims that the revenue is in the $100-200 million range, which I find dubious. But either way, the NBA, by contrast...
Let's take the betting site over a journalistic outlet. But anyway, go ahead.
Of course.
Of course. Typical Walsh.
Brings in $10 billion of revenue with something like $3 billion in profits. So that means that the NBA generates more than 150 times the revenue of the WNBA. And if you're going with the, I think, quite generous $100 million estimate for the WNBA, then the NBA makes only 100 times that amount.
Oh man, I can't wait to see how the Majority Report debunks this one.
So do the math here, by the way, and you'll see that pound for pound, WNBA rookies actually make about the same as NBA rookies. 70,000 times 150 is 10.5 million.
That's not the worst point I've heard, but I'm sure the Majority Report's got this.
But even then, they're still overpaid because although the WNBA generates 60 million in revenue, or even if it's 100 million, let's say, it makes no profit. These women are getting paid salaries to play for a league that, economically speaking, shouldn't exist.
I don't like this. My preconceptions are being challenged.
This is an example of when conservatives naturalize pre-existing hierarchies or inequalities and basically say that they are just because of their existence.
I get it. Walsh was naturalizing pre-existing hierarchies or inequalities and saying they are just because of their existence. How did I miss that?
But there's just absolutely no excuse for a professional league to be paying the top overall pick, again, with the scale being what it is, sub $100,000 a year.
So that's not an insignificant amount of money, but she probably would have gotten paid a lot more had Matt Walsh not naturalized pre-existing hierarchies or inequalities.
He also doesn't understand the basic tenets of capitalism, which is just the idea that, like, you know, people are investing in women's sports right now, and there's headlines about Serena Williams wanting to buy a WNBA team because they see that now the media coverage is here.
It's a growth.
And it's growing.
Yeah, but isn't the term growing kind of a prospective concept? Matt Walsh was saying that the WNBA doesn't make profits now.
Matt Walsh himself hasn't invested in women's sports because he sees the money in it. He just hasn't invested in the way that the people you just mentioned have. He just invested a lot of time on his show to talk about women's sports or the safety of women's sports.
I'm not sure what this homeless guy just said. Did Matt Walsh invest in women's sports or not invest in women's sports?
Which he apparently also, out of the other side of his mouth, says he doesn't give two shits about.
That was my next point, Bender.
Oh man, is the homeless guy named Bender?
You read my mind just because Lady Ballers, isn't he in that movie?
Why are we talking about Lady Ballers? Wasn't that a parody of transgenderism?
This just shows exactly what you were saying, Bender.
Oh, it's Binder, not Bender. That's a shame.
Like, that they cared about women's sports for a period.
She said women's sports and period. I don't know if that's a sport joke or a menstruation joke.
And only to discriminate against trans women, only to demonize them, only to use it as a wedge issue to prevent them from getting further rights.
Why are we talking about trans women again?
But now that women's sports are actually showing...
Yeah, women's sports are showing. It's like they're pregnant.
The business press is saying this is the growth market. This is where all the growth is at.
But again, that growth hasn't happened yet, right? Please don't make me agree with Matt Walsh.
If the WNBA had 50-50 revenue sharing, what the salaries might look like. But he says, I've done 4 interviews. This is a table from Slaying the Trolls. The NBA has money to play its top players. So they
don't have, unlike the NBA, they do not have 50-50 revenue sharing.
Yeah.
This is also, the NFL also relies on this model of 50-50 revenue sharing.
Okay, that seems unfair. I'm back on board. Matt Walsh definitely stinks.
So this is the reason that is her salary is not because of, again, some sort of natural selection.
Excuse me, don't you mean the naturalization of pre-existing hierarchies or inequalities?
Or the way that, consumers are moving in this way.
I don't mean to be a stickler, but moving in this way is also sort of perspective. I don't see why that would help current players.
It's because their union, the WNBA union, do they have a union? I mean, if they don't have a union, they do. They have to. I think all of these sports have to have these unions under the antitrust exemption. But the union...
The WNBPA is what it's called.
The WNBPA, now I lost my train of thought. What were we talking about before?
We were either talking about women's sports, Matt Walsh, or transgenderism.
Oh, this is what I wanted to say. They probably perceived that they had very little power given the fact that there wasn't much coverage of the WNBA at that time, so they negotiated these contracts that are exploitative and less than the 50% revenue sharing model that you would see in other sports.
I'm really glad you remembered what you wanted to say. That was very valuable.
But you have to realize that all these leagues are built on breaking the bodies of people who are at the more replacement level of professional athlete, and they're always on the knife edge. And if you are at the minor league level in any sports, you are struggling to get by.
Yep.
I don't want to be a negative Nancy, but sports kind of sound like they suck. Why would anybody do this?
Yeah, I mean, just to go back to your point about Lady Ballers and Matt Walsh and that whole thing.
Must we return to Lady Ballers?
I think as trans women have been saying since the beginning that, all of this right-wing attack on trans women has always been a thinly veiled way of making the misogyny that's already present in their circles slightly more palatable to a wider audience.
What?
It's like these people clearly do not like women. They don't, and how could they ever care about the sanctity of their sports?
Does the word sanctity really apply to sports?
The very premise that a bunch of guys like Matt Walsh or people who work for the Daily Wire,
it's actually the Weekly Wire,
would be able to beat semi or even amateur women's basketball.
Nope, I was wrong. It's the Daily Wire. My bad.
So I'm sure Matt Walsh thinks he could probably take Caitlin Clark one-on-one in a b-ball game. And so why should she get paid, right?
I don't want to defend Matt Walsh, but I'm not sure that that's what he was saying.
It's just very transparent.
Transparent? Is this guy making a trans joke?
I guess I'm just glad that I'm always glad when they have a mask off moment like this, where it's like, yeah, women shouldn't even be allowed to play sport professionally. Right. They don't make money. They don't because it goes to show that the people who, the suburban moms, insofar as they exist out there, who align with this anti-trans woman rhetoric because they want to protect their women's, their daughter's ability to get a scholarship to go to Brown for playing lacrosse. The people like Matt Walsh, who they're aligning with, they don't think they should be allowed to do that either.
So suburban moms are worried that their daughters' opportunities will be taken by trans women. But those suburban moms also agree with Matt Walsh, who doesn't think women should have sports at all. This sounds a bit dubious.
They don't think they should get a scholarship. They don't think there should be a NCAA women's league. They think there should be no vehicle for women to be in any man's space or even parallel segregated adjacent sports spaces that resemble men's spaces because it's just not feminine enough.
Again, I don't want to agree with Matt Walsh, but I don't think that that's what he said.
Well, I mean, it's also she would be showing competitiveness and some sort of drive, and that is antithetical to his conception of what a woman should be doing. She should be barefoot in the kitchen.
Not really what he said. I really don't want to agree with Matt Walsh on this one.
It's also very interesting that he brings up WNBA profitability. What's the point? They should be paid nothing.
Nice. I think we're back on track.
How much are the actors paid on the Daily Wire movies that make nothing while they cost millions to make?
Nope, spoke too soon.
How much did Lady Ballers make at the movie theaters, Mr. Walsh? The movie that you acted in, I'm assuming you were paid for.
I don't know why the homeless guy brought Lady Ballers up again.
Did Daily Wire, the company, get their money's worth for Lady Ballers in terms of a profit-for-profit accountability, in terms of the revenue? Did it make back the revenue, what it spent on the movie, but also turn a profit?
I have to admit, for a homeless guy, that was a noble attempt at putting together a sentence.
Good point, Bender. Which investment is going to perform better over the next 5 to 10 years? Is it going to be conservative film industry or women's basketball? I know which I would put my money on.
Totally.
I think we're going off the rails again.
Look, if these women wanted to have a legitimate career, they should get a billionaire sugar daddy, right-wing podcasters.
Yep, definitely off the rails.
Do we have any more of this, or is that basically the extent? Oh, we'll see just 20 more seconds. And then
pound, WNBA rookies actually make about the same as NBA rookies. 70,000 times 150 is 10.5 million. But even then, they're still overpaid because although the WNBA generates 60 million in revenue, or even if it's 100 million, let's say, it makes no profit. These women are getting paid salaries to play for a league. All right, pause it for a
second. So has he called for the abolition of the app Uber?
What?
Because I don't know for how long, but Uber did not turn a profit for many, many years, despite major capital investment, and despite the fact that they do not pay their drivers a living wage. Has he been calling for that? Because there are plenty of these tech startup companies that do not turn a profit for quite a while.
Oh my God, I think I agree with Matt Walsh. It's kind of by default because the majority report hasn't really said anything relevant, but I think I agree with Matt Walsh.
How far back do you think we have to go for this to be true, Emma? 22 of 30 teams were losing money, and the average operating income per team set at $6 million. But
for the NBA?
For the NBA, when 22 of 30 teams were losing money.
I'm going to say 1989.
That was 2011.
What? Really? Past the Michael Jordan, and we're in the middle of the LeBron James era. These teams are losing money.
So 22 of the 30 teams shouldn't have existed in 2011. I guess is the logic. We should
abolish men's sports.
I guess just skip right to the playoffs.
Yeah. Whatever. This guy's such a clown.
Oh no, I think I agree with Matt Walsh. No. No!